Hi, this is Rob from failedmuso.com and welcome to my new review on the UVI Emulation One sound library for UVI Workstation. Get some technicalities out of the way. This is for the UVI Workstation version 2.0.6, which is a free download from uvi.net. You get the plugin and the standalone player, and it will work in all VST audio units, RTAS hosts, as well as Motu's Mac 5 sampler. And you will need version 2.0.6 because it contains an effect that was added at that version that this library uses. You'll also need an iLock key to download the license to authorize you to use this library wherever you see fit. Okay, so Emulation One, what is it? Well, you might remember a little while ago they released a library for their UVI workstation called Emulation 2, and that was based on the Emulator 2 sampler. I say based on, it wasn't and never was meant to be a recreation of that particular instrument. It was a collection of sounds inspired by and taken from an Emulator 2, and this conversely is one taken from an Emulator 1, the predecessor. Actually, it wasn't called the Emulator 1 back in the day because it was just called the Emulator. They didn't realize it was going to be 2, 3, 4 and so on. So they've gone back a step to the Emulator, and they've taken a lot of the sounds from this and done their thing with it. Just to give you a bit of history about the Emulator, it was released in 1981 and was on sale for a couple of years, and during those 2 years there were a few different modifications, such as the 4 voices of polyphony went up to 8 voices, a real-time digital sequencer was added about halfway through its life, and there was also MIDI at some point. The technical specification of this machine back then was probably quite impressive. By today's standards, it's archaic. This sampler had a sample rate of around 27 kilohertz, and it was at 8-bit. And the sample memory was a whopping 128 kilobytes, which gave you around a couple of seconds of sampling time. So this was pretty primitive stuff, but what it did very well, and it took a whole bunch of sounds and made them all of its own because of the sonic characteristics that 27 kilohertz 8-bit sample rate would give it. It retailed for around $10,000 back in 1981 and slowly decreased in price across its 2-year lifespan before the Emulator 2 came out. And it was built like a tank and designed by the people that designed the Apple II computer in terms of its visual presence. It was very, very basic. It had a 49-note keyboard and very, very limited controls on the front panel. There was something like a dozen buttons and some knobs and a couple of sliders, and that was it. It was very, very limited. And everything was loaded in via a 5¼ inch floppy disk on the left-hand side of the keyboard. It was most famously used by people like Depeche Mode, New Order, OMD, Jean-Michel Jarre, Vangelis, and of course Stevie Wonder, who always tends to be first in line for wondrous technology such as this. Now, UVI have gone to great lengths to stress that this is not an officially authorized or licensed product from EMU. This is a collection of sounds that is inspired by and pays homage to the Emulator sampler, just like all of their libraries of this kind of genre do. So, what does it give you? Well, you get for $99 or €99, you get well over 200 patches. You also get Drumulation One, and if you remember the Emulation 2 library, they took a lot of their drum sounds and bundled them up into this lovely interface that mimicked the EMU Drumulator, which was their sampling drum machine of the day. They've done pretty much the same sort of thing, but with a whole bunch of different sounds, and they've slightly tweaked it to give it a more retro look. And so you get a whole bunch of synth sounds, and you get a whole bunch of drum programs and drum hits and sounds that you can use in your compositions. So plenty of stuff to be getting on with. As ever, it's got a great UVI interface, and we'll have a look at that in just a second. So let's have a quick look here, and let's call up the library itself. So Emulation One. As you can see here, we've got a whole bunch of categories, and we can go through those one by one. They've all got a whole bunch of sounds underneath them. So let's have a look at some of these and have a listen to what they sound like. I've picked out some of my favourites. Actually, before we go and listen to those, let's have a look at this interface, because it is something to marvel at. They are really gorgeous interfaces, the UVI interfaces. And what they tend to do is they've got a stock set of functionality. And then what they do is they adapt that and give it the look and the feel of the instrument that it's mimicking. So for example, here we've got this very simple blue, almost hammerite type colouring scheme here. The horizontal sliders that mimic the horizontal sliders on the original emulator, and the fact that it had these big black chunky knobs and these little switches with the little LED lights at the top, almost like 808 style buttons. And it really does evoke a memory of the original emulator. All the functionality is much the same as it is on most UVI libraries. So you've got your amplitude and filter envelopes. You can mess around with pitch and velocity sensitivity and your filters. You can also mess around with the overdrive and the stereo functions, and you can assign a whole bunch of things to the mod wheel. And you've also got some basic effects here, phaser, delay and reverb. And not forgetting that over here in the effects section of the UVI workstation itself, you can add in more effects, and you get a whole bunch of effects with the UVI workstation for free as standard. So you can mess around with these to your heart's content. You can also build up multis, and so you can layer sounds and have different parts going on. So if you like some of the brass sounds, you can gather 3 or 4 of them together, layer them, and place them in the stereo field and get some really nice, powerful, evolving sounds going here. That's great for sound designers. These are really, really nice sounds to play with. Just down the bottom here, we've got the obligatory keyboard here, and you'll notice that there is a shaded red area of a couple of octaves. And initially when I got this library, I thought, oh, what's that for? And played around. And thought, well, there's nothing unique going on in that red zone. So I dropped the guys at UVI an email, and they got back to me pretty much straight away and told me that this was the original key range of the particular sound that was sampled to provide the patch that we have here in Emulation One. And I've never actually used a real emulator keyboard, the Emulator One, but I do understand that there were 2 levels, lower and upper, and you could load samples into the lower range and also to the upper range. It only had a 49 key keyboard, so I'm guessing that it was kind of split in half, or you could split the sounds in half. And so what UVI have done here is they've just literally marked out that 2 octave range for the samples, and it wouldn't surprise me at all, because back in the day, you know, with very minimal sample time and very crude sampling rates, anything that got stretched too far would sound probably unlistenable or not very pleasant at all. So if anybody would like to clarify that, please do so in the comments section of this video, or over at the write-up on the blog at failedmuso.com. So let's have a listen to some of the sounds, because clearly this is a sound library and why we are here. This first one, Acoust Hybrid, which is a really nice bass sound. I really like this one. Nice percussive, deep, resonating bass sound. And there are so many patches in here that I could go through, but I've picked out a few highlights, ones that I really like. And a lot of these sounds sound very familiar. You might not be able to sort of remember the song that you originally heard them in, but they do sound very familiar indeed. Let's go on to the bells section, and there's some really nice sounds in here. This one in particular. Very evocative, and some nice tubular bells in here. I mean, they're pretty standard sounds on a lot of keyboards now, but and it's the grittiness and graininess of that kind of 8-bit sampling that UVI have actually preserved There is always the temptation, I guess, that you can clean up these sounds for the modern day, and had a recent experience with the GeForce Retron rack extension, where people were saying, "Oh, it's only got 35 notes, and why couldn't it?" Well, no, that's what the original had, and this is what it's it's trying to keep the faith, and keep the reality of the instrument there. So I like the fact that they've kept the graininess and the aliasing that's going on in the sounds there. Moving swiftly on, let's pick up some brass sounds. What have we got in here? There's some fairly standard brass sounds in here, but I do particularly like, I do like my French horns, and this one's a very nice one as well. And don't forget, you've got these controls in here like the overdrive, and you can switch the overdrive on. And as you wind it up, which is really nice. And of course you've got the mod wheel effects. And you can mess around. That was a combination of vibrato and filter change. Of course, you can turn those on and off as you wish. Some really nice effects in there. Moving on swiftly, let's go to one of the staples of these old samplers, and that's the voices. Well, it wouldn't be a sampler if it didn't have a kind of Fairlight voice in there somewhere. So. There's the old classic Fairlight voice interpreted by the emulator there. And there was another one in there which is really kind of nice. It's this ethereal voice. Some nice phaser going on in there. Let's go on to some of the fretted instruments in here. The drums, I'm going to skip over those because they're fairly dull. I'll be honest. There's not a huge amount in there. There's some nice sounds in there. You might be able to pick out one or two hits, but fretted. This is a nice one. Dream acoustic. Nice if you kind of like have a pedal note down the bottom here. That's quite a nice sound. And the other one that I particularly like in this section is Luther King. I really do like patch names and coming up with patch names and getting some in-jokes in there. Nice little plucky sound in there. There's some really nice effects in here as well. I don't normally go for the effects. They're usually the last section that I go into. But I was particularly intrigued when I heard one of the demos in here. I thought, oh, it's got that sound. And there it was. And this is known as Motorcycle 1. And if I hit this note, all of you Depeche Mode fans will go, oh, as soon as I do this. Here we go. You recognise that? Of course you do. It's the opening sound to the song Stripped, which is, I think, then swiftly followed after about 8 repetitions of that by, I think it might be this sound. And so, these effect sounds that you probably not even look at are actually worth, investigation. There's some other really nice sounds in the effects section. It's one that I've now kind of learnt to dismiss at my peril. It's not your typical emulator waterphone, that one. The standard one, which you'll find probably on Emulation 2. That's got a really spooky feel to it. I really like that one there. We've also got hits, of course, another staple of most of these 80s bass samplers. We've got hits and chords, and there's a few that I've picked out here. For example, dark bed hit, which really works right down the bottom end. Nice kind of drone sound in there. I do like that one. We've got one here called Smooth Trumpets, which I think is rather nice. Just unique, you know, and it's got that quality that the lower or higher you play it, then the faster that or slower that trill goes. But I just like that. It's different, and it just sounds kind of old and gritty. And another one here called Suspense Phase, which is rather nice. Could be used in so many different ways that you could take that, maybe loop it and have it as a kind of a drone sitting in the background, or use it as a hit. Yeah, some nice stuff in there. World sounds. I always think world sounds do quite well in these samplers, and let's pick out a few here. Well, let's just pick out this particular. I do like Chinese type sounds. That's a personal one, I suppose. We've got a percussion section in here, and let's. I picked out a couple in, or one particular here that I really did like. It was this Reggae Man one. It's kind of neat. I like that. I could actually see myself looping that up and having that as a kind of an inspirational kind of loop. I tend to use loops that way rather than use them in full songs. I just like to use them as sketch pads. Strings, loads of string sounds in here. One in particular that I really like was this harp, 8-bit harp. Kind of Depeche Mode-y sounding sound, and also cellophonic in here, which I thought was quite nice. I like that one. And let's go to the synth section and see what we've got in here. For example, this one's a really nice sound. Like that one a lot. And there was a nice harp synth sound in here. And this other one here, which you see the name Jar, you kind of got to go for it, haven't you, really? And finally, there was some winds and woods, as they call them in here, and particularly liked this one here, Dark Flute 1. A nice woody feel to it. Very nice indeed. So there's a whole bunch of sounds, and as I say, I could spend loads of time going through those, but that's Emulation One. And do you know another one of the things I forgot to mention here about the GUI here? You notice the reflections in the sliders as you go down. You know, little things like that just very neat. I really do love the interfaces that UVI come up with, and I've spoken to them personally, and I try and badger them remotely as well through various forums. I'd love them to develop these for the Reason Rack extension format, because I think graphically they would fit in very well, because they get a lot of control in a nice small space and they make it look very nice and it's very three-dimensional, and that's one of the things that the Reason Rack extensions kind of demand. And I'm not entirely fussed about what libraries they do, but I think they could really do very well here. And I think there's a burgeoning market for retro sample-based libraries, things from Emulator, Fairlight, Waveframe, the stuff that UVI is certainly doing a lot of at the moment. And so I'm going to go on record again and say, please, 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 UVI, tell me that you are looking into doing Reason Rack extensions, because I think that they would sell very well, and it would certainly make me very, very happy, because I'm a very proud Reason user, and that is my workstation of choice. Anyway, that's Emulation One. We also have, if you remember, Drumulation One. So let's bring that up. And this, if you're familiar with Drumulation 2, which came with Emulation 2, is not going to be much different. It's just a slight different look. What we've got here are two 16-step sequences. And we can load up 8 samples, 4 in each sequencer. And we can trigger each of those samples individually through the steps. Confused? Don't be. It's fairly straightforward. So we've got these two instances, 1 and 2 of the sequencer. And in each of the instances, we've got all 16 steps, and they are, you press the button once to trigger a note. You press it again, the light turns to yellow, which means it's triggered, but it's at a lower velocity. Press it again and it turns it off. So it's very straightforward, very common type approach to step sequence drum programming. Across the top here, we've got the mute button, we've got a volume control, we've got a pan control, we've got tuning, we've got a couple of filter controls for high and low filters. The sample selection just here, and we can flick through the samples, or we can just click on it and go through the list. And the same is replicated right down here in the second sequencer. Now, underneath the two sequences, we have these 4 buttons. The first button is 1 and 2, where 1 is the bass drum samples and 2 are the snare samples. Then we've got this bank here, and you'll see this changes what samples are loaded and the sequences that we've got, and that's hi-hats and cymbals. We've then got the third bank, which are toms, and the fourth, which is percussion. So we can have 8 samples, all individually triggered, and all with their own individual tuning, filter settings, volumes, pans, whatever. So we can create our loops such as this, and it comes with a whole bunch of loops built in, and it's just a minimal amount just to get you going. And let's have a listen to some of those. So you get an idea. There's a whole bunch of stuff in there, and you can do your own simply by just programming these in, and it's good fun. And you've got loads of samples to choose from. For example, this is just the snare drum samples. You've got all of this down here, and then the rest of those. There's a lot of stuff in here, and you can go to the tom section, and the hi-hat section here. Nice selection of cymbal sounds. Tom section. We've got loads there, and the percussion, again, lots and lots of stuff. So you're not going to get bored. And if you want to call up a loop and have it triggered by a sequencer, well, the loop starts and stops on the C3 key. so you can do that. Or down here you can see these blue notes. These are the individual samples. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So you've got all of these samples in here, and you can trigger them individually, or you can create loops and do it that way. The choice is yours, and it's very nice and flexible. I use this much like I use Rex loop samples in Reason, where I use them as just a bed for some ideas, just to get me going, and then I'll start programming on top. What I would probably tend to do is come up with a pattern in this, and then maybe recreate that in my DAW, either set it up as a loop or embellish it with the individual hits. It's entirely up to you. But there you go. That's Drumulation One, again looking nice and early emulator-ish, and that pretty much is Emulation One as a package. So what's the verdict? Well, yet again, UVI have come up with a really, really usable package. It's $99/€99. It weighs in around 785, I think, megabytes. So it's kind of lightweight for a UVI library who normally sort of venture, sort of 2 to 3 gig. This is quite lightweight, and but it doesn't suffer because of that. The samples are short and sweet, but they're very effective. Where UVI really win is in their user interface. Their user interfaces are just gorgeous, and not only are they gorgeous to look at, but they're very practical and easy to use. And so I'm a massive fan of that, and big up to the guys at UVI who do the user interface design, because they do a fantastic job. The quality of the samples is typically good, as it always is with UVI. They don't skimp on the quality, and yet they do preserve the character of the stuff that they're sampling. So with this 8-bit sampling stuff that they've done recently with Emulation 1 and 2, and of course Darklight as well, they've really preserved a lot of the grittiness and the character of those instruments, and that's very important. It's all too easy to clean things up, and things then just sound very dull and sterile, and it's been done 100 times elsewhere, so you can go and get those sounds anywhere, but with that grittiness it makes them stand out, makes them very unique. That's it really. It just really is a great library. It's good value for money, and it looks fantastic. It works very well indeed, and I would just love to see this as a Reason rack extension. I'll say it again. So guys, if you are listening, please tell me you're doing that. Please tell me at least you're looking into it, and if not, when I'm in Paris next, I will beat down your door until you do. That said, that's UVI's Emulation One. It's out now. You can get it from uvi.net. I believe you can also now get it from Best Service, the German sample library distributor, bestservice.de. And I do believe I saw that at a slightly cheaper price. So if you are able to get it from there, you can get it for, I think, about €89 as opposed to 99 direct from UVI. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I saw, and so if you're looking to save a bit of money, might be worth looking into that. Emulation One from UVI is available now from uvi.net. You can also get the manual from there, the UVI workstation from there, and there are loads of video and audio demos, all of which I will post over on my blog, which is www.failedmuso.com/blog. You can find the full written review there, along with all the demos made by people who can properly play keyboards, and probably much more representative. In fact, there's one in there that I just want to give a name check to. There's a guy called John Parkins who is a bit of an emulator fan and aficionado, and he's well known on the internet for his libraries for old emulators that he still creates to this day, and I think he's got at least an emulator too, and probably an Emacs as well. Well, UVI got in touch with John, knowing his love of these machines, and John has done some demos, and some of his demos really pick out the signature sounds, and are very evocative, and certainly made me reach into my pocket and get this. So check out John Parkins' demos, and all of the UVI demos for their instruments can be found on their SoundCloud page. So just go to SoundCloud and search UVI, or go to the UVI website and you'll find all the links there, or you'll find them at the bottom of my written review at failedmuso.com/blog. Thanks ever so much for watching, listening. I hope you enjoyed that, and I hope that that's helped you make your mind up with regards to this library. It is not a recreation of the instrument. It's an homage to the instrument. So if you're expecting a full-on emulator replication in VST format, this isn't it. This is a collection of great sounds that will work in many places that are inspired by and sourced from an original Emulator One. There you go. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care. Bye bye.